Chairman, Professor Garik Das. Also, thank you, Professor P.R. Datta, Executive Chair of the CBER, and also Professor David Graves, Center for Innovative Leadership Navigation, for inviting me to be part of the 7th International Conference on Globalization, Entrepreneurship, and Emerging Economies. It's a pleasure to be with you as part of this group. I have a presentation which I will share here. So it's when I actually started on this presentation, I did not realize the theme was globalization. So I have adapted it, given the nature of the conference. And what I'm trying to say here is that for economies to survive and grow, there is a need for skills persons. Many economies, in particular emerging economies, are facing a shortage of skilled people. This is also true in developed countries. This was an issue that was relevant prior to the pandemic and has actually become bigger post-pandemic. As economies globalize and firms look to enhance production or enhance services, as well as productivity, the availability of skills person could either accelerate the process or create severe disruptions. Currently, the world presents a mixed picture. In some sectors, some economies, there might be adequate skilled people, but at the same time, there would be firms and sectors that face a shortage. Unemployment rates are high and increasing in some countries. And yet there are a number of jobs that are vacant because of the lack of skills. I would argue that a multi-pronged strategy could help address these challenges. I've divided the presentation into 8 broad topics. The first 5 try to capture the challenges, and the remaining 3 propose a set of solutions to address a problem so that firms and economies could grow and in fact survive. So I'm just going to, okay. First, post-pandemic, there are shifts that are taking place in different economies. Before going into some detail, I would like to bring out survival in which context. It is perhaps best defined by the word coined by historian Adam Tooze. The world is in the midst of a polycrisis: economic uncertainty and inequality, political instability, the threat of climate change, and these need to be understood not only individually, but more so through the interaction with each other. Robert Rubin, while reviewing Tooze's latest book, Shut Down, said that this challenges the way in which our institutions and systems and the assumption of positions and the divisions that undergird them leave us ill-prepared for the next crisis. And I believe the education and skilling infrastructure is leaving us unprepared for the next crisis. Global trade is slowing due to the presence of inflation and global uncertainty. Post-pandemic, firms are looking to reshape supply chains, looking for alternate sources, and in many cases, it's a China plus one strategy. Nations are promoting onshoring. I think labor shortages added by the fact that people are wanting to retire or work from home and with caps on immigration are big issues for many sectors and businesses. The World Economic Forum's 17th Global Risk Report 2022, just released, notes that the economic fallout from the pandemic is compounding with labor market imbalances, protectionism, widening digital education and skill gaps that is risk splitting the world into divergent trajectories. 25% of the respondents felt that livelihood crisis has worsened and will become a risk to the world in the next 2 years. So it's a huge challenge that we are looking at. If we look at what are the challenges, if I take education, and I know there's a session on education later on, and I'll just be very brief on this. How do we address this fact that 65% of school children globally will end up working in jobs that do not exist today? On curriculum that is obsolete. In fact, it is estimated that in engineering, 30% of what is taught in the first year is not relevant by the fourth year when the person is looking for a job. The practice or the process to change curriculum in institutes is arduous. There are a huge number of steps. It takes 2 to 3 years. And the one certain fact that is happening is that the amount of knowledge is expanding. But what has not changed is the time to change it. And therefore, the question is, what do we teach? What do we leave? How fast do we teach? And how do we actually share the journey of education? Further, for many emerging skills, there is a lack of availability of new faculty, and existing faculty lack the competency to teach. And I'll give you examples as I go along. In addition, in the area of employment and jobs, many are unemployed or underemployed. According to the ILO, the share of temporary employment as a percentage of all employment has grown by 6% over the last decade, reaching close to 30% of the employment. The share of gig workers is set to rise, and the share would rise therefore. So how do you skill, and what are the programs that you put in for temporary workers? For permanent workers, you actually have a system, but temporary workers, what do you do? During COVID, many sectors had to lay off people. Those employed in those sectors do not want to go back, and the young want to stay away. For example, ICAO, which is the aviation agency, forecast that the APEC region will require 19,870 new aircraft by 2037. Over 281,000 new technicians will be required. Over 250,000 pilots would be required. 50,000 plus air traffic controllers, and over 300,000 airline staff. But nobody wants to join the industry because of what happened in the last 2 years. The speed of obsolescence is also increasing. In the developing world, over 2/3 of the jobs are open to automation, and 14% of the jobs in the developed countries would get automated. The new commitments to net zero are increasing, and ESG would mean that jobs would be greened. All of this leads to the belief that over 50% of the current workforce would either require reskilling, which is the R, upskilling, which is the U, and new skilling, which is the N. So it's a run strategy as we go forward. The changing demographics, coupled with education and employment challenges, is a third factor. Most developed countries are aging and have gone past their peak in working age population, some as far back as 2012. Some are extending retirement age, while others are automating jobs, some both and more. In emerging economies, while the working age population is increasing, in some it is falling. So if you look at the slide, you will see that there are many countries where the age is increasing: Malaysia, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Nigeria, Argentina, Brazil, while in China, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Russia, Ukraine, it is actually falling. So you can't club the emerging or developing economies in one block as far as the skills challenge goes. But what is common across all these things, there is a need for skills as we go forward. Emerging economies, they strive to globalize and increase per capita income and share of trade and production, while they have a large number of youth. The youth lack the skills that are required for the job market, and that actually hampers their strive to globalize. There is a gap between the current skill levels and the need available in jobs, and also in employment or entrepreneurship opportunities. This actually creates a very unique situation. There are jobs without people and people without jobs. There are perhaps a large number of causes, but if I were to restrict it to the education and skills system, there'll be 5 key reasons. Many developing countries have a challenge of shortage of gaps in basic education. Most countries have a challenge as we talk of do not have information on which skills are required and where, and there are also gender barriers to skill development and low labor force participation by women. Given that COVID has accelerated the pace of digitalization, there's a huge shortage of digital infrastructure and training infrastructure. For example, the IFC report highlights the fact that across Africa, 230 million jobs would require some form of digital skills by 2030. And there's a huge gap in training and digital infrastructure, which can act as a barrier to the growth and development. The situation is perhaps no different in the developed world. An IBM study brought up the fact that the skills gap across Europe would negatively impact economic growth and innovation. Most firms are finding it difficult to find right talent with either the requisite education or skill experience or the work experience. This has to change if the sector has to thrive in the EU. The European Commission is actually doing a lot of work in this area. A lot of money is being poured into it. They found that there's a huge lacuna in the syllabus. And in addition, 1/4 of the PhDs from Europe go and find employment outside of Europe, primarily in the US. There's a war for talent, literally a war for survival. To develop talent in the machine learning and AI space, as well as the artificial reality and virtual reality or augmented reality and virtual reality space, some topics have to be introduced early, especially in mathematics, and if possible, as part of the math program. There is currently no curriculum, and the existing maths teachers are unable to deliver the curriculum as is required. Are there models to actually understand and bridge this gap? Is there a methodology? I noticed that we have two speakers from Moscow in the panel later, and it's just by sheer coincidence I chose this case study. Over 8 years ago, I was part of an exercise to look at what are the jobs of the future and how do we prepare for them. This was done by the Agency of Strategic Initiatives and Skolkovo, the Moscow Management School. What they did, and they focused on group discussions around the world, in different parts of the world, with different stakeholders as to what could be some of the future jobs. And they developed an atlas of future jobs across 26 sectors. At that time, no one had thought of COVID, so they were very optimistic. They felt that the change would happen in 2020, not realizing that COVID actually came. And some of the jobs that actually came out was energy auditor, online doctor. In fact, COVID accelerated the need for online doctors, GMO pharma. And after 2020, they talked of job roles as cyber prosthetics, virtual reality design. And interestingly, they also cataloged what jobs will disappear. Accountant, shorthand typist, proofreader, a phonographic teacher, lecturer. A lot of academics here, so I was very scared to put that on the slide, but blue collar jobs that are becoming obsolete, ticket inspector, porter, freight train driver. No one is talking of autonomous vehicles and things at that time. And what is interesting, they map the skills required with the different education, skill training organizations in Russia, their capabilities and how they could be equipped to teach the skills, where they could get the faculty and who they could cooperate from industry, and what alliances are required. Of course, like I said earlier, the COVID has derailed much of this, but the methodology is worth emulating. The World Economic Forum also learned from this process, and the World Economic Forum also brings out some of the jobs going forward. So if this is the challenges and this is the methodology, how as a nation can we address this challenge? Clearly, if you think out of the box, we can take these challenges and convert them into opportunities to change the nature of skill development and education and align it to the needs of young and the national as well as global economy. Whatever we do, we need to build a skills coalition to solve the issue in each country. There are 6 key stakeholders who need to come together within countries and across countries and build a skills coalition. First, government. Almost all countries and all governments in all countries have the education and skills program fragmented across multiple departments of government, multiple ministries of government. They've segregated higher education, lower education, technical education, etc. So we need to get them together. Governments need to encourage private-public partnerships like the NSDC model, which was, which I had the opportunity to implement in India, where the government can get scale, the employer's execution, and the NGO's trust among the local people. It is a set model: scale, execute, and trust. Governments have to drive skill and education policies that help address the challenges. India, for example, has a new education policy underway with current discussions on the national curriculum framework. Over 100+ countries have set up skill funds, and some even targeted to future skills, including the EU is looking to address the shortage in machine learning and AR/VR skills. Education institutions, which is the second peg of this partnership, have to look at partnerships with industry. What cannot be taught by changing curriculum should be taught by forming partnerships with industry. In India, sector skill councils are offering courses on universities. For example, when we went into laying fiber optic cable, no telecom engineering program in the country was offering a course on fiber optics and actually allowing people to use fiber optics. The Telecom Sector Skill Council with industry developed a course and put on an add-on course into the engineering college. And then the employment rate of those students actually increased. Competencies required by industry should be integrated into the curriculum with micro credits and also give lifelong learning opportunities. Many skill organizations and training organizations are not open overnight. I think we need weekend learning, night learning in most parts of the emerging economies as well. Australia has a good example that can be followed. Faculty need to upskill, develop skills to teach and train. Labor unions is a third. They need to encourage the workers to participate in skilling, support efforts, and encourage workers to upskill and reskill. The three other stakeholders are students. Students and their parents have to behave like partners in this ecosystem. In many emerging economies, parents put pressure on the teacher just to complete the syllabus and not do anything outside that because they're so exam focused. This has to change. They must focus on learning how to learn, be adaptive, and look at courses behind the curriculum, beyond the curriculum. Students should endeavor to carry proof of skills in addition to degrees. Just degrees will not do. It was very interesting when the Prime Minister of India launched the skills, the Work Youth Skills Days. He said he had this commerce graduate who came to him and said, "Sir, I want a job." So he asked the student, "What can you do?" He said, "I'm a commerce graduate." So he said, "Yeah, but what can you do?" So the student said, "Again, I'm a commerce graduate." He mistook the graduate and the degree for the ability to do something, and that needs to change going forward. Employers are the next important element in this and have to play a primary role. They have to own the skilling process. They have to participate in the skilling process by providing training, recognizing skills by looking and promoting certificates by sector councils or education institutions, providing microcredits. And of course, they would need to aggressively promote apprenticeship and internships with certifications. A change in mindset is required not only to focus on their needs. Most companies try and focus on their needs. They want to hire the best and the brightest, and they don't want to raise a lot of level of the people around in the country. That has to change. They need to also work in overall skill development programs and skill councils. Many societies, many people in the emerging world do not look at skills and vocational education as equal to education. Skilled persons are looked down upon. This has to change. As a global community, we need to respect and value skills. Governments around the world are publishing a list of skills they face shortages and would like to attract people to work. It is a major shift from where we started. To this list, perhaps a competency or job role and a qualification could be added. This would enable other stakeholders to see if they could train and supply requisite persons. Immigration policies need to change to facilitate movement of people. They could mutually recognize qualifications and assessments and certifications. A good example, and I will talk of 3 examples in case studies, is the first one with India and UAE, benchmarking qualifications across 13 skills qualifications, the UAE, to 15 Indian qualifications. And for drivers, they're accepting 16 of the certification sectors in India, and the 16th one is done in the UAE, and they plan to change it going forward. The Indian-Japan Technical Intern Training Program is another good example where graduates, engineering, diploma holders, etc., in identified skills are taught Japanese language, and they are then sent as interns in Japan for a period of time. And after they do that, they come back to India and actually add to the talent pool in India. The third example is really the specified skill worker with Japan, where 12 sectors have been chosen across health, which is nursing, manufacturing, and agriculture, where people are trained here and sent to Japan to work with their companies and their systems, and then come back to India. I think government and private sector can collaborate to set up or scale up skill development initiatives. The IFC report that I talked about earlier about the digital gap in Africa talked about how initiatives by different organizations, including one which is the Anudip Foundation from India, could be replicated in Africa to enable them to address that huge skill gap for millions of people that they have by 2030. Government and private sector could actually set up skill development centers in different countries. India is working with a lot of countries, and so is Germany, and so are other countries. Each of these challenges that I presented before is an opportunity to build a new partnership and find solution to bridge the gap between jobs and skills and changing the lives of millions across the world. I would like to end with a thought from the Nobel laureate Amartya Sen. He says, human development as an approach is concerned with what I take to be basic development idea, namely advancing the richness of human life rather than the richness of the economy in which human beings live and which is only part of it. With the 3-pronged strategy that I talked about earlier and the run and set models, it is possible to actually bridge the skill gaps in most of the countries around the world. I would like to thank you once again for this opportunity, and I will be happy to take questions.